My name is Aaron Riley. I'm president at CannaSafe. We are a licensed testing lab located in Los Angeles, California. We currently have the largest testing lab in the state. We test cannabis and CBD products there. So the first thing I typically do when I speak, I talk a little bit about my background, how I got in the industry, and then connect the dots to the present. So I started looking at the industry in about 2014. I spent about 2 years doing due diligence on different segments from testing, growing, CBD, the investment side. I started going to conferences similar to this. I went to MJ Biz in 2015 for the first time. I looked at about 10 different state markets, and that was when it was still a little bit early. There was very few rec states, and even on the CBD side, it hadn't really taken off. Eventually, I decided I was going to go into the testing segment, and I started really focusing on testing labs. There's a lack of testing labs. If you guys are in the space, you'll know that there's a lot of inconsistencies. There's not really any standardization yet. It's really hard to, as a business, it's hard to buy something when you don't really know what you're getting, because people can send the same thing to 3 different places and you can get 3 different results. And there's not really a metric for being able to trust that. So I decided to focus on the testing lab space. CannaSafe was the first ISO accredited testing lab in the world. That happened in 2012, testing cannabis lab. Back in 2012, the ISO accrediting body was very anti-cannabis, similar to everybody else, but they were unwilling to actually do it when we had first requested to get accredited. And what being accredited is it's document control, quality control. Basically, you're having a third party come in to your business and audit you and make sure that you're doing what you say you're going to do. So initially, when CannaSafe called PJLA to set up an accreditation, they said, "Oh, what do you guys do? Oh, hey, we test cannabis and CBD products." And they were like, "What? We can't come accredit you." And then after several months of kind of working with them, it's like, "Hey, you're not accrediting what we test. Like, we're not asking you to co-sign on what we're testing. We're asking you to co-sign that we have a quality system in place and that we're doing what we say we're going to do." So we're proud to kind of be at the forefront of setting the standard for testing these products. We've worked with several states in finalizing their regulations. We're about to join the Hemp Roundtable Board. We see that CBD is currently unregulated, and I think that's going to change rather quickly. So we're trying to get at the forefront of that, educate consumers, businesses. We have some pretty big CBD clients right now that are testing per California cannabis regulations, meaning they're testing every batch, labeling with QR codes, making sure that you know what you're getting on the product side. So jumping into CBD testing, I always joke with people because they ask me like, what's better, CBD or cannabis products? And the reality right now is that cannabis products in licensed states and licensed shops are actually safer, and the results are more accurate than CBD products. If any of you guys have seen the CBS show, The Doctors, they came and shot a segment at our lab about 4 months ago now. It was in August. And they were on the quest to see, what's the hype about these CBD products, how do consumers know what they're getting, what to look for. And they bought 20 products and they brought them to our lab to test them all. And they bought them everywhere from CBD shops, online, you name it. Just 20 random CBD products. Of those 20 products, only 3 would have been able to sell in California under the cannabis testing regs, meaning that the labeled amount of CBD was within 10% of the label requirements, that it passed for microbial, residual solvents, heavy metals, pesticides, all of the contaminants that go along with it. So obviously they were like, wow, because if you take a cannabis product off the shelf that had passed through all the testing, it's 20 for 20. Like, you're pretty much 100%. A licensed product that's been tested and it's in a licensed shop, it's going to have been tested and ready for sale. So it was a big shock to really find out that the CBD market, it's more wild west than cannabis. Of those 20 products, probably 10 had little or no CBD in it, which is, obviously, if you guys are in the industry, people selling waters and stuff like that where they just has nothing in it, and they're labeling CBD 100 milligrams. And if any of you guys are CBD isolate buyers, it's really expensive. And it'd be hard to compete against somebody who's selling a product that doesn't have any CBD in it. It doesn't have anything. They're selling a bottle of water. You're selling a bottle of water with CBD, maybe 50 cents or 75 cents worth of CBD in it. That's not really fair from a competitive standpoint. A couple of the products also had very high levels of solvents. Some of them had pesticides. So not only were they inaccurate in terms of the quality and the CBD contained, but they didn't even, they weren't even safe for consumers. I mean, they had super high levels of hydrocarbon alcohols, basically. Like, one of them was so high that it had so much alcohol in it that you would literally, you could huff it and be like, oh my God. So obviously that's a product. As a lab, we're working with businesses the same way we've worked with cannabis businesses. We worked largely in an unregulated market until this year. Before 2018, there was really no required testing, at least in California. Some of the other states had testing requirements. So we saw last year probably about 75% of products that were being sold, flour, edibles, drinks, all that, 75% of them were bad, meaning they had pesticides, they had solvent issues, which is really pretty crazy. With regulation, that fail rate for products has gone down under 10%. It's like 6 or 7% now, between 6 and 8% basically. So we've seen a lot of improvement, for products, and the businesses that really have jumped on that have really started to excel. A lot of the brands that we worked with, we've watched them be able to tackle regulation, because right now, and this is in cannabis, but it's going to be coming to CBD, is people have a hard time following the rules when they haven't followed the rules for a long time. It's like, the kind of the joke is, you got the cannabis guys who are drug dealers and doing whatever they want for however long, and then you got the business people that are trying to get into cannabis, and it's a race. Are the cannabis guys going to figure out business before the business guys figure out cannabis, or CBD? But yeah, so we always advise people test. You test your product throughout the process. You test when you know what you're buying. We'll go to the next slide here. So Koi CBD, is anybody in here familiar with Koi? Yeah, maybe, yeah. Okay, Koi's they're a decent sized CBD brand. They're one of our bigger CBD clients that's really kind of adopted. They're going after the California cannabis regulations, which is more expensive. For a business, it's definitely expensive to undertake. All the regulatory side, making sure everything's tested. But at the end of the day, they want to deliver a safe product to consumers where they can stand behind it and not only know what they're delivering, but have consumers know what they're getting. And up here on the slide, we have outlined kind of the process that they go through from when they buy isolate to when they sell a product. So when they're buying CBD isolate, they meet with different vendors, they check out their manufacturers, which I would encourage as a good practice for all of you guys is especially if you're buying bulk or you're starting to get there, is you want to see what, if somebody's not willing to let you come visit or tour their facility and you're spending money with them, there's probably something wrong. So check it out, have them give you a test report, but also send a test report to a lab that you trust, that you have a relationship with. So they go through a process when they're buying isolate, they send it to actually a couple different labs. We obviously provide a service for them. With us, they do potency with a couple different labs. With us, they do the full safety screening. They test for microbial contaminants, Salmonella, E. coli, Aspergillus. They test for heavy metals, which is a problem not in the U.S., not from U.S. derived hemp, but from Chinese derived hemp. We've seen a lot of heavy metal problems. They also test for solvents, pretty much all the safety things that you can test for. And then after that, they take their isolate now, and then they begin the formulation process. So they go from isolate, they make everything from dog treats to oils, all kind of things. They test so they take isolate and they test like a pre-production batch. Basically, they make sure that whatever product they're making, just say it's a dog biscuit, and they want to put 10 milligrams of CBD in a dog biscuit. So they'll make a production batch, a small production batch of those dog treats, and they'll send them in to get tested before they package them all. So they do a little run. Same thing goes for all the other products. And then that goes well, so their formulation was correct, meaning that they actually had between 9 and 11 milligrams of CBD in whatever that product is. So they'll do a production run from there. And that could be anywhere from 500 to 4,000 of whatever they're making. After that, that's when we come in and do the final test where we send a representative of our lab out there and we pull random samples from their batch. So we pull whatever the minimum we need for testing. Just say it's 1,000, so we need 6 bags or bottles or whatever they're selling. So then we take those back to the lab, we homogenize them. So if it's, just say it's hemp oil and it's supposed to be 1,000 milligrams of CBD in it. So we'll take 6 bottles, we'll mix them all together, and then we'll do the full panel of tests starting with potency, and then we'll do all the safety stuff. So that way, they're assured, basically it reduces your product liability, you know what you're delivering. There's a QR code that we give everyone with the test report, so you can send that to, you can put the QR code on the packaging. Consumers can go look on that and go to our website, verify what they're getting. If you're another vendor, if they're selling it wholesale, they can send it to their suppliers. Our COA has the batch number on it and our SOP for sampling, meaning that you could be assured that it was third party, meaning that the lab came to the site of the business, we grabbed the sample, we took it back to our lab. There's chain of custody and paperwork for all of that. So here's an example of some CBD test reports that we've done. The product on the left here, this is the Koi, this is 1,000 milligrams, and they're pretty much on point. And typically what we see is, obviously there's going to be a little bit of variance between labs, but if somebody hasn't done any preliminary testing, there's no way they're going to get that close in formulating, unless they have an internal lab or something. But if you're just buying isolate, or you're buying CBD oil and you're trying to get something to be 1,000 milligrams, it's tough. I don't know if anybody's done any type of product manufacturing, but it's hard to get that close on a CBD product. So this would be an example of a final batch. This here would be an example of an isolate somebody tested. So this particular client buys, he does wholesale CBD. So he buys batches of isolate, gets them tested, and then resells them. And this is just kind of the safety portion of our report. If you guys go on our website, you'll be able to see a full report, or our Instagram. In the bottom left of our report, it's a QR code. Typically, we have the product name, the sample ID. You can see right here, there's a batch number on this one, the dates. And then over here, we didn't show these will have the client's name and all the information, yes.
What range should you test in? Like it says 1,002 milligrams per unit. Like what's an acceptable range?
10%. So acceptable range would really be 900 milligrams to 1,100. And that's actually pretty tight. Like if you look at pharma, like even Advil has a wider variance than that. Advil's like 20%. Like most over-the-counter drugs are 20% variance. So if somebody's within 10%, that's usually very good. That means that they're pretty consistent and on point. This is like getting an A+ right here. Typically, I think they hold themselves to a much higher standard. I think they try to get under 5% on everything, which is hard to do, especially with CBD. CBD oil is more stable. CBD isolate's not very stable. There's a lot of degradation there. It's very sensitive to heat, light, those sort of things. It's not water soluble. So manufacturing for CBD is actually tougher than manufacturing for cannabis or other food, just because it's hard to get that stability. That's why you do need to do a lot of R&D, do need to do a lot of testing along the way. So the future of CBD regulation. As a lab that's worked in cannabis and unregulated market, moving regulated to the regulated side, we see that CBD is going to be regulated pretty similarly. There's several states, Utah, Alabama, that are actually requiring, from some of our CBD clients, they're requiring that we have testing like we do, where they have a batch, they have a QR code, they can show how big the batch was, where it was tested, whether it was tested for safety, make sure the cannabinoid's on point. At some point, I don't know whether the federal government steps in and decides to take over on the regulatory side, or whether they let each individual state kind of police it. But at some point, that it's going to be regulated and it's going to be standardized. We recommend to follow the guidelines of the states that you want to sell in. So depending on which state you're manufacturing in, if you want to sell in, say, California, or you want to sell in Oregon, that you follow or test according to the regulations of those states. If you pick one of the tougher states in terms of regulatory wise, California, Oregon, Massachusetts, Nevada, and you follow that kind of a regimen, then you typically will be able to sell in any state. It's also important to look for a lab that's accredited. There's a lot of labs out there that have toxicology backgrounds or environmental, and we see them that are starting to test CBD, or they're the tox labs that are doing urinalysis, and they're accredited to test THC and CBD. Kind of the ironic thing is they're accredited to test that, but it's in your urine. It's actually not a product that's contains CBD or THC. So we recommend finding an accredited lab, that ideally if it's local, you can get a tour, kind of go see, feel them out, talk to the scientists there. Because it's definitely a process as you're learning to make these. Nobody's very good at it yet. Even if you're really good, you're still the best of the worst. Because this is all a very new industry. For us out in California, we kind of see that as setting the new standard. I think the only critique we would have is the batch sizes are a little bit larger than these other states, but California had to fit this much product through this many labs, whereas a lot of the other states had time to set up, and they didn't have infrastructure for growing and all these different types of products, whereas California had a mega infrastructure on the product side and very little labs. So this is just a little bit about CannaSafe. Kind of what sets us apart is our accreditation. We maintain that. We're accredited to test for everything that is on our scope, meaning every test that we do, from water activity, moisture, all these things. If you're interested, have any product that you want to be tested, we can get you with the sales rep and kind of go over the process, what you should be looking for, how you should handle things. And now I'm going to open it up to questions.
How do they separate the CBDs from THCs?
So typically they don't. So when you're going to an isolate, like if you're going from a industrial hemp to an isolate, there's going to be small amounts of THC in pretty much any type of cannabis product, whether it's industrial hemp, it'll be 0.1%. When you concentrate that down, it's going to increase. But typically it starts on the, whatever you're growing side to really separate it. Even the purest isolate, we're seeing like 0.001%. Obviously it's underneath the DEA threshold. But it really comes down to whatever the starting material is, because once you get into the distillate form, like it's actually easier to separate THC because when you're making distillate, CBD volatiles off, it cooks off. It comes off at a lower temperature than THC.
So the CBD oil it's just been extracted from the product and then just reduced down, suspended, they take percentage of that resin, I guess.
It would all come from this, like whatever the starting product is. CBD is just very fragile, because THC has a higher boiling point. So you can't have something that has say you had something that was half THC and half CBD. You're not going to get, and that's in the plant form, you're not going to get that down to an oil that's just CBD. So it has to start with, most.
Strain that's high CBD and low THC.
Exactly.
What about out-of-state testing? If you're in another state, I want to set about will my state honor the information that I'm getting since you guys are in California?
If you're CBD, yes.
Yeah.
So CBD, obviously, obviously, if you're growing cannabis, we can't accept it out of state. But CBD products, you can ship them and you can sell in other states. So we do service the entire country. We actually have some international clients from Jamaica. But yes, you can mail us CBD products to test.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, in one of the earlier presentations, someone said that there was no real baseline standard testing that every other lab can be measured against yet. So do you have a vision as to when that might happen and how it can happen?
Yeah. So in terms of standardization, there's a couple different variables. One is the preparation of stuff. Like for instance, in the agricultural world, there's prescribed methods for testing for pesticides on like crops of corn and stuff that comes in. And it's called catchers. And there's basically like 3 derivations that you can do as a lab to test for those pesticides. That hasn't came out in cannabis. We're starting to see that. California's been the most thorough in terms of regulating the preparation process, and basically making sure you're doing it right without saying you have to do this. The second thing that comes into play is methodology on the instruments. We're measuring stuff in parts per million, parts per billion, and there's a lot of different variables. The equipment has variations, so there's not been a standardization in terms of methodology that's accepted. I think that our plan right now is we're growing very rapidly. We have the largest market share in California, and we're expanding into several other states. We would like to get to a point where we can share everything with everyone else, but right now we're at a weird point where it would give people a huge competitive advantage to share what we've learned over 7 or 8 years. But on the government front, we're working with Americans for Safe Access, PFC. We're also working with, we're going to work with the Hemp Roundtable in terms of pushing that envelope, and ASTM, an organization that sets basically testing standards for all the testing industries. So we're pushing that. I think right now there's really not even enough people doing it that can even come to the table and say, hey, here's our data packet. We've done 100,000 tests, and here's what we found out, and we've tried this and tried that and tried this, and this works the best. So I think that'll happen, but it'll probably be over the next 2 to 3 years. It'll be whenever the federal government gets involved.
How is it, on your analytical techniques, how easy is it to tell from potent/intact CBD versus CBD that's degraded?
So doing the potency test would give you an idea of what kind of CBD percentage or milligrams per gram was present. So we've got some shelf life studies going on right now. We've noticed that obviously since CBD is not water soluble, it's the least stable in water. So we've had people that start in water with 10 or 50 milligrams and literally just sitting on the shelf, being exposed to normal inside LED lights, it's degraded pretty significantly over a month. But if you're referring to isolate, the easiest way is to take a sample and get it tested right now and see what kind of degradation is there. Isolate, as long as it's not exposed to light and water, it's usually pretty stable for longer than other product types.
But it's relatively easy to